So as we've been reporting, China, Germany, the United States, natural disasters, whether caused by global warming or not, are forcing thousands of people across the planet to move from their homes or take action in some way. Let's talk to Dr. Eleanor Parker, a climate change and disaster management expert at Coventry University. Dr. Parker, welcome. So Germany cleaning up, the United States wildfires burning, and now China's devastating floods. Can we categorically say that climate change is to blame for all of this?
I think we can say climate change is certainly a factor in perhaps the scale of the events that we're seeing, and maybe the fact that they're happening perhaps more frequently. But you have to remember that underlying this, we've had several decades of research and investigation into the hazards in the areas in the countries where we live, the risks that exist, and we've had multiple opportunities based on the projections of the likely impacts of climate change, of the warming in the atmosphere and the increased potential frequency and severity of rainfall. And yet we've actually achieved very little in terms of reducing those risks on the ground. So I was looking at some of the headlines before coming on your programme, and some of them talked about preparedness failures in Germany and things like that. And, you know, there comes a point where no level of preparation really was going to prevent the damage on the scale that we've seen in Germany and as we're seeing currently in China. That's the problem here is perhaps systemic. It's legacy infrastructure that's can't cope with the amount of water that we're receiving now. It's planning policy that means houses and hospitals have been built in flood zones. So we can't put the blame on climate change, because I think the risk we face then is that we focus on climate mitigation, so thinking about emissions. We have to take a much bigger view of this.
Let me ask you then, if I may, do you think that these tragedies in all three countries we've been reporting on and around the world will perhaps galvanise governments' efforts to up their game on cutting global emissions?
I would hope so. I would hope that the pandemic has also influencing governments to realise the scale of change that we need. The fact that in research in academia, we talk about transformation. We talk about, when we come back after disaster, not trying to recreate the governance systems, the policy decision-making processes, the planning structures that existed beforehand. We have to start doing things completely differently if we're going to be able to deal with the risks that we face in the next 10 or 20 years.
You know, when you look at these devastating pictures from around the world on this programme, I mean, it's pretty clear that extreme weather events like this are here to stay and perhaps even becoming more common. What can ordinary folks do? When you watch this, it's easy to feel totally helpless, isn't it? So what can individuals do, if anything?
I would say there are two things that we should do. We as global citizens need to be pushing our politicians and our leaders to make the kind of changes to the policy decisions that they make based on helping people, protecting people, rather than necessarily thinking about trade and finance and all those other things. The other thing we can do is get involved with our local communities. There is a huge amount of strength in our local communities. We've seen this in the pandemic, we're seeing it now in Germany. The first responders are the community. They're the people that are affected. So the more involved people get in their local community before emergencies and disasters happen, the greater the strength that they will have, the shared resources that they will have when disaster strikes.
Dr. Eleanor Parker at Coventry University, thank you very much.